A lot of people think when you buy a house, you have an asset. Sorry to disappoint you. A house is not really an asset, it's actually a liability because it takes money out of your pocket. After you buy the house, you have to pay the mortgage, you have to pay insurance, you have to pay HOA in most times, and you have to pay property taxes. What part of these things I just said puts money in your pocket? Hello, wealthy Christian woman. You're welcome back to this channel. I appreciate you taking the time to come to this channel and listen to whatever I'm saying. But today we are talking about financial intelligence. Financial intelligence. When you talk about financial intelligence, there are 5 key words I want you to remember. There is the income, there's expense, there's asset, liability, and the most important of them is cash flow. I realize that a lot of times, most of us don't really know how to define our assets and liability. I'm not going to talk much about income and expense because I believe that everybody knows what an income is. An income, if you have a business that you go to every day and it makes money for you, that's your income. If you have a job that you go, you clock in, you clock out, you work Monday to Friday or you work Thursday to Tuesday and you're being paid, that is your income. And now when you take the income, you're supposed to save part of it. And when you save part of it, what you save is now supposed to be converted into assets. So I want to focus on talking about assets and liabilities because I believe or I notice that a lot of people do not know how to define an asset or a liability. So they're getting mixed up. People think that certain things that they bought are assets, whereas they are actually liabilities. So what is an asset? Again, I could bring a balance sheet here and talk you through a balance sheet, but it's not really going to do much good. So I'm going to simplify it as much as possible. An asset, simply put, is anything that puts money in your pocket. And a liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. For example, a house. You buy your house. A lot of people think when you buy a house, you have an asset. Sorry to disappoint you. A house is not really an asset, it's actually a liability because it takes money out of your pocket. After you buy the house, you have to pay the mortgage, you have to pay insurance, you have to pay HOA in most times, and you have to pay property taxes. What part of these things I just said puts money in your pocket? Yes, you're right, none of it. All of this takes money out of your pocket. So a house is not a liability, it's not an asset, it is a liability. But a house can also become an asset. How can a house become an asset? If you bought a house, maybe an apartment, duplex, fourplex, or a house and you rent it, a single family home, and you rent it out, and the tenant pays your rent, and the rent is able to cover the mortgage, the taxes, the escrow and everything, and at the end of the month, after collecting rent and paying everything, you end up with $25 or $50 or $500. That house is an asset. Why? Because it puts money in your pocket. But if it's only taking and taking and taking, it is a liability. So if you buy a car, you're paying car note, you're paying insurance, and that's a liability. But that car can be an asset if it puts money in your pocket. For example, if that car is transporting you to work to go and earn your income, or you're using it for Uber or Lyft or Dashdoor, then you have turned the car into an asset. So if a $15,000 car can take you to and from work, that car is an asset. But if you did not buy a $15,000 car, you bought a $100,000 car, well, you do the math. 15% of that investment is an asset. And how many percent? 85% of that car is a liability. So at the end of the day, it is a liability. It is not an asset. It's not putting money in your pocket. And am I saying that you should not buy a fancy car? No. I'm saying you should not go to work your hard-earned money and take it to buy a fancy car. Instead, when you go to work, you get an income, you save the income, you invest in an asset. When the asset generates cash flow for you, that cash flow, you have the liberty to use the cash flow to buy a luxury car or an expensive car or expensive items. Why? You're not using your hard-earned money that you worked by yourself. You showed up, you put in hours and energy. You work that money, that's your income. You're supposed to invest it in assets, and then those assets are supposed to generate cash flows, and then those cash flows are what you're supposed to use to live a luxury life, to get a luxury car. But so if you just want a car to take you to work, and there's a good car that will not leave you on the road, it is good, it is in good working condition, you can buy it for 20,000, you leave it alone, and you go buy a car for 50,000, whereas you could have gotten a car for 20,000. Well, that 50,000, 20,000 of it, 20,000 of it is an asset, and 30,000 of it is a liability. So you can actually own one item that is both an asset and a liability. So the asset part of it is the part of it that is used to bring money into your pocket, which is what we're talking about, cash flow. Cash flow is the most important word to consider when you're assessing whether something is an asset or a liability. So if you buy land, for example, when you buy land, that is a liability. A lot of times the land comes to you, you're paying a mortgage on the land, you're paying taxes on the land. A lot of them have HOA, very expensive HOA that costs about $2,200, about $1,200 to $1,300 a year. Divide that by 12, that's over $100 every month you're paying on HOA for a piece of land that is not generating income for you, right? I know you're telling me if I sell the land and I make money, then it will become an asset. You're right, but you have to do the calculation. How many years are you taking to pay for this house, this land? And eventually when you sell it, how much profit do you make? If there is a profit, then eventually you've converted your liability into an asset. But if you ever convert it, maybe you sell it higher and then you don't take into account the taxes, the insurance, the interest that you paid. Over time, you have to do the maths to determine if this was an asset or was it a liability. So I, for example, when we bought our first home, it was a liability. We lived in there, we paid home insurance, we paid taxes on it, and then we paid a mortgage. Eventually, we left the house, we rented it, and then we moved to another house. That house then became an asset because we put a tenant there, and the rent that the tenant is paying, it was able to cover for all the expenses, plus $100 or $200 left a month. So eventually, the liability became an asset. So I want you to understand what is an asset and what is a liability, so that when you are making a decision, you are conscious of what you're doing. So an item can start as a liability, and it can eventually be converted into an asset, right? But once it's an asset, it's always going to be an asset. So I want you to think and be smart with your money and know what you're putting into. Put it in something that generates cash flow. That's why cash flow is a key word. Is it bringing in money or is it taking money out of the pocket? So now you understand what an asset is, you understand what a liability is. And then most of the biggest liability of our lives is taxes. You're paying a lot. We pay a lot of taxes. Everybody, most people pay a lot of taxes. Income tax, property taxes. That's a big part of your liability. So you have to think about what smart ways, what can I do to be able to reduce these taxes that I'm paying? Is it, do I need to get a business, get into real estate? What do I need to do? Again, talk with your financial advisor and get more information on how you can, reduce or minimize that. So thank you again for coming into this channel. I want to encourage you to share this video, to leave a comment. If there's a specific topic you want us to handle as far as finances are concerned, please leave a comment. Reach out to me. You can find me on social media. And you know who I am. I'm Clothing Tway. If you search Clothing Tway, you'll find me somewhere. Thank you again for watching. God bless you. Jesus is Lord.